Right. Hello again. We're going to start this InfoShare on eduVPN. As you can see, there are some slides that we wish to start with. You can interrupt us at any time, either through the chat or by raising your hand. I'll be presenting, so I might not be seeing if you raise your hand, but I hope other people will. It's a collective presentation. It's been made by François Kouman from Dyke, who's the main architect behind all the server side of eduVPN. GÉANT from Uninet, who's also helping with operating some eduVPN stuff. Anas Chablis from Renater in France. Jorge Spro from Surf, who's not here today, and myself from Dyke. And I have to find out how you move slides. And the goal of this, well, there are three goals in this InfoShare. The first one is to underline how eduVPN can be used as your corporate VPN solution. So that's what we call institute access, and that's what we will focus mostly on in this InfoShare. Then the second point we want to make is looking back at what happened in the last few months with the COVID-19. Well, COVID-19 has been a great thing for eduVPN because a lot of universities decided to switch from their usually proprietary solutions to eduVPN, and we would like to explain a bit the context in which this has been possible. We found out that in the NRENs, where there was an effort to accompany institutions, it was much more successful. So Anas will present what they did in France, where we moved from no institution using eduVPN to around 10 big universities today. And then in the last part of this InfoShare, we want to present the new client apps that we've been working on, and that we're progressively releasing. So that's the agenda. eduVPN for institute access, what we learned from the COVID-19 crisis, and the new apps. So as mentioned before, what we call institute access is really a corporate VPN solution. It means that you use eduVPN to have an encrypted tunnel from your device to your institution, to the private network to some private network. But to give a bit of background, what is a bit special, I mean, there are a few things that distinguish eduVPN from other solutions. First, it's been developed within this community. It's been developed first by Surf, then called SurfNet, and then a number of NRENs joined the collaboration. And then it entered in GÉANT without being only in GÉANT today. It's been very much inspired by EduRoam and the way it has progressed in the last 15 years. It's open source, and it's something that we care about. It's open source both on client side, but also on server side, which is not the case of most other VPN solutions. And we try to be responsive to the needs that are specific in our community. And what we have currently is a number of software components. If you want to see all the details, the best place to start with is our GitHub pages. And but on the server side, currently, it's eduVPN in a way is a very secure configuration of OpenVPN today, with some other features. We are testing. We currently have a test set up with another protocol than OpenVPN, WireGuard, but it's still in a test mode. And on the client side, we have native apps for most operating systems, and we're changing these apps. But basically, we want to have something that's that's very easy to manage and use both as an admin and as an end user. So from the for the admins, they have a portal in which they can see what's going on, who's using their instance. They can also revoke configurations. They can push things to the end users. And there's another portal for end users where they can also manage their configurations if they want to. For example, if they lose a device, the screenshot is from the admin portal, and you can see at the there was in the previous slide, you can see at the bottom the distribution on that very instance. I don't remember which one it is. I think it's a server in Amsterdam. What our end users use, most people use the Windows app when they use eduVPN, and then comes other platform, macOS, Android, a few Linux users. Yeah, and another feature that's adapted for the community is the integration with different authentication mechanisms. I mean, you can use various traditional username and password. You can use LDAP radius, but most instances that we know of, because we don't know all the instances, it's open source, anyone can install it, use SAML and federated identity, and you can decide to use two-factor authentication and other things, and that's that's something that's been valued by the people deploying eduVPN. And the way you deploy the VPN is up to you. You can decide to route all the traffic through the VPN. That's what we actually advise our people deploying a VPN to do. But you can also do split tunnels, that is only routing some of the traffic that is trying to reach your private network and not route the rest of the traffic, or do client-to-client networking. And for example, one of the institutions that deployed eduVPN the last few months is CNUS in France. CNUS is one national organization, and I think 27 regional institutions in France with 15,000 users. And for these different kinds of users, they have different profile. One of the profile is just for people when they are outside of their institutions to have a secure tunnel to CNUS and then to the internet, but then they have other profiles. I'm not sure it's user-friendly, but during this presentation, we tried to copy-paste some of the testimonials we got from the people who deployed eduVPN to show how real it is.
If I may complete your
please
add some comments about CNUS. So I would like just to say hi everyone first. So this is the French national administrative body that provides students in France with multiple public services. So they normally animate and coordinate synergies of universities to ensure cohesion between them. So they use eduVPN production, and they are really very happy with the service. It's not because I'm taking part of the project, but this is real. So the advantage for them was to use eduVPN was the capacity to deploy it and to customize it easily for their internal needs. So they have, for example, quickly developed a part to delegate the administration part to the 28 national institutions, regional institutions. So they were able to just, I think, less than 1 week develop that, and they are quite happy with it. And they have each national regional institution has its own, I would say, visibility on their end users, for example. That's all.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And to understand what is at stake with this open source solution supported by the NRENs, you have to take into consideration how much it costs for a an institution to have a VPN solution in place. This is an example from my university in Denmark, the Technical University of Denmark. So we are like 11,000 students and 6,000 employees. And before the COVID-19 crisis and before we were all sent home, what we had was a solution from Cisco for 1,000 concurrent users. And the cost in hardware and software over 3 years was 135,000 euros. And then COVID-19 arrived, and then they had to, they decided not to use eduVPN, but to buy a lot of licenses for Cisco because they have a lot of money. And that's a huge cost, and we think that so there's added value in providing something that we think is even better. And usually what we saw, this is like another example, it's these two institutions in Osnabrück in Germany, like the Hochschule, the University of Applied Sciences, and the University of Osnabrück, started using eduVPN during the crisis. And in this case, they started to use eduVPN on top of their existing solution. So not totally switching to eduVPN, but they wanted to address this need, and then probably they will switch to that solution when their licenses end with their commercial solution. And so how is eduVPN managed in these universities deploying it? So the vast majority of universities deploy it on site, locally on premises. So it takes like a VM, or you can also use like a hardware, a server. But so they deploy eduVPN on their own. If they want to be in our apps, hard-code in the apps, then they have to sign a policy, and the policy is very much inspired by eduRoam. And basically, what it says is that you need to update your software. You need to meet a number of security requirements and quality requirements in order to be in the apps. But you can also use eduVPN without being hard-coded in the apps. But that's on-premise, managed locally. We actually find regularly that there are universities that use eduVPN or under the eduVPN name or the other branding we have, and that we're not aware of. So that's one way of doing it. And then you have a second model that's less frequent, which is the model currently implemented in Surf and in Uninet. So in this case, the eduVPN instance is managed centrally. So you can have different kind of high availability and redundant setups. So in a data center, and then you have a link back to the private network that you want to reach. It's fully managed and supported by the NREN in this case, and they actually charge for that service. If you have questions on this model, you can ask Jörn, who is in the call from Uninet, how it works. And you can do that later as well. Yeah. So I don't know if at this stage there are questions. I only see my PowerPoint presentation, so I'm a bit blind. But yeah, so now moving on to the second part of this presentation, so a bit more focused on the COVID-19 crisis. It's another example, a very long one. If you read fast, you can read it. Otherwise, I'll move to the next slide. But it's an example of a university in Portugal. So what happened when COVID-19 crisis sent everyone home, and then a lot of IT departments were confronted to the limits of their hardware and licenses for VPNs and remote access to things. This was not as much of a problem as video conferencing, but this was maybe second or third on the list. And in Portugal, the way FCCN addressed it was that they actually advertised eduVPN on their website and produced a guide in Portuguese about how to deploy eduVPN. And the University of Minho was one of 5 or 6 universities that decided to to deploy eduVPN. This was done very quickly. And at the bottom of this slide, you can see the main arguments in favor of eduVPN for this university in Portugal. It was costs. The fact that it's very simple to use for end users. You don't need to import a config and start a third-party client. You can use native apps on all platforms. And there was also the scalability of eduVPN. It's we have a couple of slides later on this, but basically it scales up very well, and that's a feature that you don't have if you have if you only use OpenVPN, for example. So before the crisis, we had a few institute access deployments in Finland, in Germany, in the Netherlands, Pakistan, Poland, and South Africa. But thanks to the crisis, we saw a lot more deployments. And so I mentioned here some of the countries where you have at least one university who switched to eduVPN. Yeah, that's another example for reference from Finland. Yeah, now we move to the part where I'd like François actually to jump in about how it scales, because that's one of the features that was appreciated by most people. François, do you want to jump in?
Yes, sure. I can turn on my camera really quickly. I don't know if anyone is actually watching. And then turn it off for performance reasons. I don't know if anyone, can you see me now or?
Yes.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm François. I'm responsible for developing the eduVPN server and also working with scaling it up to support many concurrent users. So, okay, yeah, one of the most common questions we get, it's basically always the first question is, how does it scale? How many users does it support? So in order to solve that, we started out quite small in the Netherlands with one virtual machine per organization. And then we had this, we came to the conclusion that per CPU core, we can support like 60 concurrent users. But it turned out that actually with users just using the VPN for normal stuff, so not downloading big files, we can easily double that. So about 100 users per CPU core. But of course, this doesn't really scale up if you have thousands or tens of thousands of users. So what we did was build a communication channel so we can deploy more servers that hosts OpenVPN processes and basically scale indefinitely based on the hardware that is available. So we have now a university in Netherlands that sometimes reaches almost 1,000 concurrent users, but they're still on one virtual machine. So, and that actually works really fine. So based on these results and the ability to add additional servers, it seems like we're really good to go for tens of thousands of users. So far, we don't have a deployment of that size, but yeah, I'm quite confident that that will work really well, as we're already supporting now 1,000 users concurrent, so connected at the same time with a virtual machine. So even switching to bare metal hardware will improve the performance even more and allow supporting more users. But of course, this also depends on what your users are doing on the VPN. If half of them run BitTorrent clients, you probably need more CPU power to handle all connections and more network connections as well. But simply connecting their home machine to the VPN, yeah, results in barely any load on the server. So, yeah, We experimented with putting the servers right next to each other, so in the same data center. But what also works is putting them in different locations. So you can have one machine with OpenVPN processes in, say, London, and another one in Amsterdam. And for the users, it's completely transparent. They can just choose a profile, let's say. If they want to access the office in London, they choose this profile. If they want to access the office in Amsterdam, they choose the other profile. And yeah, this actually works. We tested this already, and I think there's a couple of production services that use this explicitly this with different locations. Yeah, I don't know what else I can say. Maybe there's questions regarding this. I guess there could be questions.
We even have a slide inviting you to ask questions.
Ah. Nice.
Can I ask a question about the setup that you have there with locations X and Y?
Sure.
Please.
So you're using a different profile for each location. So are you using separate pools, IP address pools for each location?
Yes. So
okay.
Yeah, each profile, well, it has to operate in the network environment where it is deployed on. So yeah, it makes sense that it has the IP addresses belonging to that location.
Cool, thank you.
There's a question in the chat, whether or not this would allow NRENs to run a central controller and each university has their own server. Yes, that is possible. I'm not sure it is recommended, but you can do that, yes. And especially if you connect it to like SAML Federation, for example, you can actually also organize the authorization that way. Based on the IDP the user is coming from, they would have access to different profiles.
But currently in the model that is operated, for example, in Surf, what you have is a separate instance managed centrally per university. And that's
yes.
you do the scaling per instance, per university, and you separate each domain.
Yeah, one of the reasons for doing this is that different organizations want to use, for example, different attributes. So you would need to have different SAML configurations based on this. And also for easily moving servers around. So if you need to scale up one particular server, you can just do that independently of all the others. And if one is under attack, let's say, the others are not necessarily affected, unless they're all hosted on the same VM platform, of course. But yeah. Someone asked in the chat if one server with 16 CPU cores can support 1,000 users. I would say sure. Even less CPU cores can support 1,000 users, depending on what the users are doing. But 16 cores with adequate network, available network capacity should really make this work. The next question is regarding high availability, or DR, which probably means something redundant. So until now, the controller part is the only thing that you cannot really make high available. This was never that important because the VM platform that the service was running on was already high available by itself. So it could move the VM to a different location, for example, if necessary. As for the OpenVPN nodes, so the servers that run the OpenVPN processes, you could implement something like this rather easy. I also heard of one organization that wants to deploy the controller on a virtual platform because it barely requires resources. So to make it high available, because of running it on the virtual virtual platform, and then having the OpenVPN nodes on real hardware. So you can also mix and match this this kind of stuff. So to answer the question, if there's like a real integrated high availability for the portal, then the answer is no. Or yeah, controller portal. So that's no at the moment. But we have some ideas about making the OpenVPN nodes operate more independent of the controller, at least for some time. So if the controller is down, that should not impact then the currently connected users. Although that actually at the moment it doesn't do that anyway. So if the controller disappears for a minute, it wouldn't matter for the connected users. So DR disaster recovery. Okay. So disaster recovery, there is none. So what we focused on was for the situation where your server is completely destroyed and you need to rebuild it from scratch. The point was that clients can recover all by themselves. So if you deploy a new server, which barely has a state, the client would notice and then just ask you to log in again, and everything would keep working as before. So if you don't, even if you don't have a server backup, you can just deploy it new, and then clients will recover. That was we tested this a lot and made sure that this works with all clients. There's another, there's an idea about using SQLite's copy of databases. Yeah, I actually know of one organization that does this. They just use rsync to copy the database to a different controller node. And then I think either automatically or manually can switch the controller when necessary. So you can do something like this manually, but this is not really integrated into eduVPN itself. So, I mean, until now, this is not really something that we focused on or worked on because it was not really necessary. If this is something that turns out to be very important, we can either depend less on the controller, so it doesn't matter so much if it disappears for a while, or indeed work on making it high available. But until now, there was not really any need. Are there any more questions? I think I ran through the text chat. Maybe did I miss something, or?
We can get back to that later, maybe. And now with our transition, still in the COVID thing, we would like to develop a bit what I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, which is what an NREN can do to accompany its institutions. And I think Anas now will present how they did in France.
Yes. So yeah, one of the first actions we had to take is to support our community during this crisis, and the first action was to help and support the French institutions on how they can reuse and use our services from remote. So we mainly focused on services like video conferencing, for example. But we noticed that they had also the need for their own services. So we were first, as I said, providing collaborative services, and we had to increase security and high level of availability of those services. And from the first interaction we had with them, it appears that they had the same issues for their own services, and they were just opening their services to the internet, knowing that it was mainly internal services at first. So because they had already some solutions for VPNs, but they were limited with licenses, for example. And the first action we had for proposing eduVPN was one was the communication, providing the communication on the service, and documentation and support and advices if they want. So for the communication, we used newsletters, for example, where we were explaining exactly what we were doing for our community during this crisis. We used the website as well. We used mailing lists. So the advantage of mailing lists is that we had directly the emails of the institutions. That was quite good, but unfortunately you have answers when you do this. So be ready to respond to lots of emails if you do this. But for the communication part, we had lots of good feedbacks, because they had the feeling that we were there as well and we were supporting them. On the other part, we worked on the documentation. This time we've provided documentation for end users. So this is the one on your right. And so this documentation, for example, explains what is the user experience with the service, how they can install the service, how they can use it. But as an NREN, normally we don't provide such documentation, because for an institute access, for example, the institution will deploy eduVPN by themselves. So the communication is at their level. But we decided to provide some documentation for end users that they can reuse, adapt for their own users. So that was the first part of the documentation, and the second one was mainly for the administrators. So we have a technical documentation on how and what are the capabilities that the service provides. So we had it wasn't really complicated to do so, because everything was already available on GitHub in English, but we had to translate it to French. And to give some examples related to our own use cases, for example, with the usage of eduVPN within the federation, for example, because yeah, they were interested by eduVPN, but they didn't know if they had to use, for example, OpenLDAP for the authentication or something else. So the idea there was to explain that they can introduce this kind of service with their own identity management tools that they are already providing to their users. So for the documentation, there is, as I said, technical documentation, but we had also some information on how to use the service and how to register within the app, for example. So it was quite interesting, because everything was already available on eduVPN website. But once it came from us, we noticed that they were more confident. And the support and advice, yeah. So we did some interviews, presentation of eduVPN to some institutions. We explained the use cases and functionalities. We gave some advices on the authentication part, for example. And as a result of that, we have now at least 8 universities. Some of them are really big, using the service, and others are testing it. And even if they have already a solution, that VPN solution that they are using, they are testing eduVPN, and from the feedbacks we have, they would like to use it in the future and replace the solutions that they have already, because it's mainly more easy to deploy, and it's open source. That's it. I don't know if you have any question.
No. Thanks, Anas. I mentioned earlier that eduVPN was started by Surf, and then that Surf was joined by a number of NRENs. The service today is in GÉANT as well, but to the technical governance of eduVPN and all the intellectual property is within the Commons Conservancy in the Netherlands, just like FileSender. And we chose that model because it allows us some independence and some possibilities to explore more experimental stuff that we could do probably if it was only in the GÉANT project. I mentioned, for example, what we did, what we're doing with WireGuard. We're supporting the development of WireGuard and trying to use it in eduVPN. We've also been doing other projects. The new apps are the result partly of an effort, a project we did with the Royal Academy of Arts in Denmark and Commons caretakers in the Netherlands to interact with users. So that's a structure that allows us to do that. So for all the technical governance, it's within the Commons Conservancy. But for the policy, and because we think that this should be channeled by NRENs, and we're very much inspired by EduRoam. We are relying a lot on GÉANT, the GÉANT project, and the central role GÉANT plays in the development of all the service aspects. Yeah, now we come to the third part of this presentation, which is the new apps we've been developing in the last few months. As I mentioned, we were funded by an NGI Trust project. And what we did was we interviewed a lot of end users. And the first result was that VPNs were not their problem and that they had a lot of other security issues to deal with. And it was very hard to speak about the apps because they were not aware enough of security issues. But what we found was that we had issues with the old apps. We had this distinction between two use cases, the one I presented today, which is institute access, and the other one, the one that's secure internet. And the end users had to know what was available for them, and that was an issue. So very often, what we could see was that the app was downloaded, and then they could not really find out how to use it, and then they would abandon it. Another issue we had was that once in the app, when they had to do the authentication, they would be sent to a web page, typically the discovery from their federation. And then from that page, they would be sent to their own university, and then to a third page with another look and feel. And for a VPN service, that was not very good for the trust and the feeling they had with the whole experience. So this uneasy flow between the apps and the web. And the third issue we had was, for historical reasons and the people we worked with in the past to develop the apps, there were different flows in the different apps, and they looked and felt different. So the main change in the new apps, and currently we, I'll talk about the launch, but the main change is that we put the discovery first. So it's both, in a way, it's both service and identity provider discovery. So when you get into the app, you ask where you're from. You can also type in your own server if you have one. That would work as well. But then when you say that you come from, for example, in my case, the Technical University of Denmark, then I'm given, I'm presented with the VPN instances I have access to. We want the same flow, same design in all the apps. And we want to stay as much as possible in the app environment. We can't, especially if people use SAML, we can't, there's always a part of the authentication process where you're sent to the web, typically to your identity provider login page. most of the flow is within the apps, and we think it contributes to reinforce the quality of the experience. So the Android app is already available in the different store. I mean, the Google App Store. macOS is also available. The iOS app should be ready next month, and in a couple of months we hope to have a new Windows app and a new Linux app. It's been much more difficult than we thought to, I mean, much more time consuming than we thought to change the design of the apps. And one of the issues we meet is the difficulty to find and recruit people who are good at writing apps. Right, now we're getting to the end of this presentation, and we have one last thing we'd like to consult you on, and maybe it's this idea of doing probably offering a longer training sessions. So we have an example, a proposal here of how it could be. It's very much inspired by what's being done by GÉANT. It's to offer a week where we would actually have 2 or 3 days where we would help people actually to deploy eduVPN and understand all the different aspects of the service. So if you're interested in that, you're very welcome to contact us. And that's the end of this presentation. And I totally forgot to mention that this session was recorded. And yeah, so if you're not happy with that, you should shout now. Well, it's too late anyway. Are there any questions or aspects you would like to see addressed, or anything you want to share regarding eduVPN?
Yes, Eduardo Martelli from Sun speaking. Is there any other NREN that you know that is going to deploy the eduVPN service?
Oh, currently we have, I mean, between the NRENs that offer a national instance and the NRENs who support their institutions, we have about 20 NRENs who offer eduVPN. So in Europe, we have instances in France, Portugal, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Cyprus, this Poland. I forgot some. Then we also have instances in Asia and in South America. We know of some instances in New Zealand. So yeah, but there are only 2 NRENs who manage the service for their institutions.
I have a technical question on the managed service. How does it work to access the internal network? So the server, the OpenVPN server, open a tunnel into the network of the university?
Yes, I don't know, Jan, if you want to, Jan has set it up in Norway. Do you want to detail how you do it?
Yeah, sure. It's just OpenVPN server. So the way we have solved it is that we allocate a list of IP addresses to an institution. And then we guarantee them that when they use eduVPN, they connect to a server that issues those IP addresses. And then we just tell them you can open for these IP addresses in your firewall. And I know that Surf has a similar solution, but they also have a VPN tunnel inside their own core network. So you can then tunnel the traffic completely into the institution, and we are still researching if we're going to do that as well.
Yes, in the Netherlands, it is mostly like this, that there's a layer 2 connection between the VPN server and the institute's network. So the institute then decides which IP addresses are assigned to the VPN clients. So those IP addresses also belong to the organization, if they're using public IP addresses, that is. So it's a layer 2 connection between VPN server and institute.
Another option that we also are using is that in some cases we have hardware at the institution, and then we will of course just offer the VPN services on that hardware, so that the clients are closest to their resources as possible. But when we don't have hardware there, we use our central data center.
I have a question on funding. So for an NREN to offer this service, we'd need to be certain that the project remains active. Do you have pledges of funding from your contributors for the next 2 years in place?
We do, and we have like we're also part of the GÉANT project, and we get a lot of funding through that channel. So, but any donation is very welcome. But we do have funding. Yeah, at least until the end of the GÉANT project, we don't see any issues. Yeah.
Thanks. Good news.
I don't know if there are any other question. If you want to try eduVPN, I mean, to deploy it yourself, it only takes a few minutes once you have a clean image of Debian 10 or CentOS 7. What we observe is that when people deploy their VPNs, the hard part is often the authentication. So it's when people have to deploy their own service provider in their federation using SAML or another authentication method. That's very often where they meet issues. So a bit, yeah, and we'll have to do some support. Well, if there are no other questions, then I guess we'll stop here. And thanks for your attention.